Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. Welcome to Season 2 of the Superintendent's Hangout. I'm very grateful to everyone who made Season 1 such a success. We had 50 episodes in Season 1, and now we're headed into and still going strong in Season 2. I'd like to thank a number of folks who are instrumental in this podcast's success. My daughter Maya for helping with editing, and she is a podcaster in her own right. Brad Bacchial for also assisting with editing and production. Tina Royster for helping with scheduling of guests and recruiting of guests. And to all of the listeners, thank you for helping this podcast grow and keeping the conversation going. In this episode, I sat down for a conversation with a dear friend of mine, Jon Detra. Jon and I go way back. Our children went to school together. We served on a board as co-chairs for a little bit. And Jon and I cover a wide range of topics, from his foray into dance, his karate pursuits, his adventures in engineering, especially at the dawn of the internet age, the .com era, his several decades of work and growth at Qualcomm, and much, much more. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did making it happen with Jon Detra. Welcome, Jon. Thanks for coming this afternoon, especially on a Friday afternoon, to hang out for a little bit. I was wondering if you could start off by telling us what your origin story is, where you come from, who you are, what experiences along the way have led up to this moment today as you sit in the office here looking a lot like Jon Voight. That's an inside joke. Wait till you see Jon's photo in the podcast. You'll know what I'm talking about. But in all seriousness, who are you? Where do you come from?
Well, it's good to be here, Dave. It's been a pleasure. And so I come from Madison, Wisconsin. Kind of spent my first 30 years in Madison, basically on the east side. Spent 12 years in college, 6 in undergrad and 6 in graduate school, and then moved to San Diego from Madison. So basically, I was kind of the good kid. And did really well elementary, and then when the parents get a divorce, kind of like triggers this big transition, and that's the same with me when I was about 11 years old, kind of like in middle school, and basically kind of got edgy and wanted to do everything, wanted to be the good kid, wanted to be the bad kid, wanted to be the athletic kid, wanted to be the everything else in between. And so basically I did really well in school up until junior year, where things kind of caught up to me. And one semester, I think that first semester, I got a B in math, and I thought the world was going to end. And, I was living with my mom, and then I just said, hey, I got to move back to Dad. He's going to, he was kind of a control freak, but I know it was kind of like straight and narrow, and kind of like basically at that point too, I'd started a karate club. After I did, I was in sports. I did football for 2 years, basketball, tennis, golf, and I decided, hey, I want to do karate, or some martial art. And there were a couple of gyms in the city, but they were kind of edgy, had some drugs and different kinds of things. And I found this flyer with a university sports club. It was JKA Karate. And I was like, oh, go up to the university, and kind of checked it out, and really fell in love. And really that was kind of like one of the things that saved me, because it kind of like introduced me to college and the university scene. Got to meet a bunch of graduate students. And at that point in my life, I found that most of my friends were 3 or 4 or 6 years older than I was always the youngest guy in every group. And it was just a real learning experience. And I really, it really helped me through college. So then when I graduated, I went to university, and my dad didn't pay for my school. So I had to kind of figure it out. I had a lot of loans and grants, but found a job as a technician. And basically there was about 5 or 10 physics grad students in the club. And they said, hey, why don't you come on and see if we can get you a technician job in a research lab. And so it was a plasma physics lab, and I had a job. It was great. And so I worked kind of half-time, and that kind of got me through school. And that's why it took me 6 years to get through.
I was going to ask you, I didn't know if you got multiple bachelor's degrees or you just took the circuitous route.
No, I had to work. And I also, after I did karate for probably about 4 years up until sophomore in college, I kind of got disenchanted with the politics in the karate club. And it was always like, who was getting a black belt and who wasn't. And I had a black belt, but I didn't like how other people weren't or were. And so I said, I need to get a break. And so a lot of people were in dance, and they transitioned to karate, and they said, hey, why don't you give dance a try? And so when I was a sophomore, I said, okay, I'll see if I can do dance. And let me tell you, as a male trying to do dance as a sophomore in college, it's not pretty. And so it was a big transition, but it was humbling, and I really learned a lot, and kind of also met some amazing people, and kind of locked into a dance troupe. And so I had this multiple-headed life where I was doing this high-tech, as a technician. I was going through electrical engineering, and I was also dancing in a troupe and doing performances. And so I really love this lifestyle of kind of being exposed to different things. And then, I basically got into graduate school, and still dancing. And that technician job really served me well. I basically got a full research assistantship. My Professor Beyer, who I have to say, may he rest in peace, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Amazing professor. He was like, I didn't know what I was going to do to go into graduate school, but he's like, oh no, you've got this great experience. We need you in the lab. We want people with hands-on experience. And boy, he was a mentor, just a wonderful guy, just an amazing human being. Just really learned a lot from him, and he really had a lot of trust in me. And it was kind of tough towards the end, because as I was going through graduate school, it was like, okay, I really the research didn't really turn me on. I think I was always better in teams and working with people and learning things together. And my research project was an individual, isolated project that I was working on my own, and just didn't, kind of carry through. And it wasn't something I really wanted to do. I wasn't into writing grants and finishing up. So I had my dissertation already. All I had to do was write up this simulation program, kind of finish the dissertation. But, some personal things, some love life issues. And
so that would have been a doctorate?
That would have been a doctorate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had a master's.
So you basically, it was like the ABD, all but dissertation piece, right?
All but dissertation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then at that point, since my research assistant kind of like run out at the 5th year, I was already teaching at a technical college. I had about like a full year of teaching math and computers. And I was also working at a pretty high-end restaurant. So I was bringing in some nice tips. So I was living okay. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just move down to Chicago and take this life. It's great, and, see what life brings me. But before I, kind of finalized that decision, a couple of people from my research group kind of gave me a call, Joe Burke and Jim Thompson. And they said, hey, Qualcomm is this new company in San Diego. Why don't you at least come down and interview and see what you think? So I had 2 interviews for engineering jobs. One was with Motorola. That didn't really work out. That was probably a year earlier. And then I did this one, so it wasn't like I was really into it. But it was an amazing experience. It was a 2-day interview. I interviewed with a bunch of people. Some of them went well, some of them didn't. And this one guy kind of decided, yeah, we could use you. Because at that point, I had stepped outside the ladder of technology careers because, my master's was in 86. This was 92. I was like, well, what are you going to do? My bachelor's was in 86, and it was like 89, I think, was when my master's. Like, what have you done for the last 3 or 4 years? And so basically, they took a chance on me, and I just joined a trial, basically a CDMA technology trial team, and I was an assistant project engineer. And I was here for like 3 months. I joined Qualcomm. It was an amazing experience coming into San Diego. It was probably the first time I was in California. And I just basically took hold of a fire hose and learned this test station. There was basically a test system. It was a new device, that new CDMA that was designed to CDMA, and it had vocoders and all kinds of amazing things. And then there was this infrastructure. It was a base station and antennas and cables and a core network behind it and hooks up to the switch network. And so I just kind of like learned that for about 3 months. And then they shipped me off to China to do this trial with probably about 20 or 30 Chinese scientists descending on us to figure out what this new IS-95 CDMA thing was. And so it was amazing. And I just never looked back from college, and just kind of got caught up in the whole corporate world of rewards and, people wanting to get things done real fast. And, my maturity and the fact that I had been around for a while really helped. And, that ability to kind of do anything that it took really kind of served me very well in that position. And so they kept me there for 6 months. I was there by myself for like about 3, doing data analysis with some of the China team and kind of doing their CDMA report for their standards. And I met Erwin in some meetings.
The founder, right?
The founder, Erwin Jacobs, and Alan Somasi. And there would be a lot of executives who would come to China. And since I was the only guy there, I would be one of the guys they would see, and I would kind of help.
So you were living in China for a period of time?
I was living in China basically in the Tianjin.
Early 90s too, right?
Early
so
90s.
Different environment.
Oh, it was incredibly different. Yeah, it was a lot of bicycles.
Yeah.
And these small little taxis. And then in Beijing was pretty amazing. We were just right across the street from Tiananmen Square. Excuse me. And down the street. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I was in China longer than I was in San Diego. And so I got back. I had another trial in India. And at the time, Qualcomm was going towards this new commercial space station equipment and doing commercial stuff. And everybody was going off of this trial system, so they really didn't have leaders. And they said, hey, you're probably the most experienced person here. Do you want to lead this whole RTS team, roving test system team? I said, oh, I guess I don't know enough to say no, so sure, why not? Let me give it a shot. And basically, I was like a senior engineer, and I basically was leading this whole team. We did a trial in Russia. We did a trial in Myanmar. We did a trial in Toronto. And we just kind of like all around the world to kind of show and showcase CDMA. So that was like my first introduction into Qualcomm. That was my first big project. And after that, it was basically moving into the CDMA commercial system and doing kind of gravitating towards test, gravitating towards deployment, kind of a system engineer, if you will. I was hired into the hardware department, but then I transitioned into the systems department. And at that point, Qualcomm really didn't have a system test or a test department. It was just a lot of developers and system engineers making things happen. And at that point, they started creating these system test organizations. And I was one of the leads of that organization. It was all matrixed together. And basically all the way up until 99 that we were talking about earlier, when Qualcomm had this big jump in stock, and they settled with Ericsson, and they had this huge windfall, but they also sold this infrastructure division to Ericsson. So at the time, I had moved into a Qualcomm only solution to try to put to bed a certain part of the infrastructure that was kind of holding everybody back. And it was this core switch that we had that was also used for Global Store. And I'm probably going into a little.
No, that's good. I'll ask you the dumb guy question in a minute.
Please.
Because I am that guy, but you keep going on that because I think we're on a good roll.
Yeah. So when we had this big transition, and I would say 90% of my friends that I worked with were kind of left back in Ericsson, and it was a pretty draconian agreement where Ericsson really wouldn't let anybody have any share of this stock rise. And there was a lot of rumors and a lot of thinking that maybe I had some inside track and I worked out some special deal, but I really didn't. And I took it personal. And that was a big transition to kind of like everything was going glory. And then all of a sudden the reality of, commercial business kind of kicks in, and you see the impact of some employees getting this huge windfall and others, kind of like missing out the boat. So that was a big transition for me. And even though I was part of this, big windfall, it was not something I really enjoyed. And kind of like, being a leader at that point and being in charge of a lot of groups, I just didn't know that I wanted to be that leader. Was I still committed? But I kind of, weathered the storm and kind of started doing other things. I worked in corporate R&D and did a bunch of demos, and I didn't really want to advance like I did before. I mean, I was on this meteoric rise through Qualcomm, just taking over the world. And at that point, the career just kind of like stalled. It's like, hey, there's got to be something a little bit more than this. And so that's when, I kind of started sampling a lot of different types of work. Here I started, doing demos. I switched into technical marketing. I started project management and program management. And we did this kind of like consultant services. We call it engineering support group. I kind of helped the North America carriers kind of like enhance their data services. This was back in the early 2000s where they really didn't understand how internet worked on a phone. So Qualcomm had this great data service. And this was kind of the classic thing with Qualcomm. They would come up with solutions before they could figure out the problems. Or, and it was always kind of like all about the technology, but never about, okay, how do you take this to market? How do you make some money out of this? And they made a lot of money selling chips, no doubt. And they had a lot of potential. But I think it ended up catching up to them, in the late 2000s, 2010s, where, just selling hardware wasn't quite enough. And they had a lot of fantastic ideas. I mean, Brew was an idea that was before Google in terms of an OS on a smartphone. Didn't really have the right strategy for business. They had another solution called MediaFlow, which was like mobile TV.
I remember that.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend who worked in that.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Bo James. I remember him showing me this device, and I was like, this will never catch on. Who's ever going to watch a video and want to carry it around when they're on the go?
Yeah.
That's why I'm not the wealthy guy sitting here.
Well, that was a big opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think, the big miss is they didn't really recognize how much the licensing costs would be for that content. They kind of felt like, hey, we're going to build it and they will come. But there was a lot of competition between putting it on a phone versus having it in cable versus on the TV. And, there was some liability in terms of the pricing. So a lot of learning that Qualcomm's gone through, and never really transitioned it into a service generating revenue that both Google and Apple and Netflix and Amazon and these big power companies, that they were able to get that. And that's where I think Qualcomm's really trying to transition to kind of overcome that concept. So, yeah.
So before I get into your more kind of the specifics of your leadership, and you're humble when you talk about not seeing yourself as a leader or wondering what? Because I know in a little bit we're going to talk about the size of the teams you've led and the different projects and for how long you did it and with what level of success. But before we get there, what fundamentally does Qualcomm do for folks who don't know? I again, like as a non-tech person, it came on my radar probably late 90s, probably right around when the newspaper started reporting on overnight millionaires, quote unquote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know most stuff's not overnight, right? There was a lot of work that led up to that point.
Sure.
But what does Qualcomm do? I always understood it as being the chip designing and tech licensing folks, but I don't know.
Well, they go up. There's a couple aspects that's really where Qualcomm shines. One is their system level understanding of deploying, the commercial, mobile phones. When you look at mobile phones, it's not just the phones, it's the carriers, it's the ecosystem, it's the standards. So for a long time, their IP really drove the company. And so they just generated a lot of IP. They've got a lot of smart guys. They understand the full system of how that ecosystem works in terms of a mobile phone operating in a carrier network globally, roaming, all the aspects of like having a phone work. And that's where Qualcomm really shines. They really understand the full system. And they haven't, they have a huge amount of people that are just really smart, that, like their system engineering is really smart. Their development and drivers, they really feel like they can do everything their own best. But, I think that starts to catch up to you at some point. But they also are a really strong hardware company. So internal to Qualcomm, the hardware is king. That's where they sell money. I mean, they sell hardware chips, they sell RF chips. That's really where their revenue comes. They have licensing for their chipsets. That's another big source. And then they have this IP. They really don't sell software. I mean, they are now. They're trying to sell software. But as part of your licensing agreement, you get that software for free. So it's really all about the hardware. That's and so over the last 10, 15 years, even 20 years, I think, since I joined QCT, which was about 15 years ago, there's been this, okay, we need to kind of understand the impacts of software and how this can really, help drive the company. It's but that's kind of what they do. So they sell hardware. They understand the system aspect of it. They're really big in driving the standards and all the drivers that impact the ecosystem that this hardware is in. And then they're just amazing at developing hardware, chips, SoCs, modems. They're really excellent at modems, RF. They've got a tremendous RF hardware team, transceivers, even power management. I mean, they just look at things. They have a style within the company where information is shared. I mean, it's a real free, open. People kind of like talk about stuff. They have reviews. Now, it doesn't always work smoothly.
Because it's human beings.
It's human beings. There's turfs and people want things to happen. But at the core, there's always this sense that, things, get reviewed and it's open access. And I think that helps drive the speed of how they get things done, as well as the quality and being able to solve problems once your customers aren't getting what they need. And they also have a good operations in terms of producing hardware and their hardware testing team is really strong. And I think as you commercialize, I think the software testing and the system testing is kind of I think the testing aspect is some of the secret sauce in terms of how to make sure these commercial products kind of go out. And that's kind of a common quote within the company. But definitely, and even on the software side, they have a tremendously smart people doing software as well. Go ahead.
So when you and I first met, well, our kids went to school together, and so we'd met kind of casually. But then when we first kind of started to work together is when we were co-board chairs on a board for the San Diego Waldorf School. Mm-hmm. And I remember that you would tell me that you get that you would get, 3, 4, 500 emails a day or some ridiculous number. And you had a team of, I think at that time, 2,000 or 3,000 engineers and various time zones. And you were always jetting off to China and India and all these different places and just working what seemed to be around the clock. Can you talk to us about your philosophy and approach to leadership? How you both as a practical matter as well as philosophically and kind of the soft skills, how you manage a job like that where you've got a big sprawling team, multicultural, multilingual, multi-continental, if that's a word, transcontinental, I guess, I don't know. Global, right?
Workforce.
Global. Yeah.
Well, I can try. Basically about 15 years ago, when I joined the QCT division, which is chipset division, that's when the teams got pretty massive. Up until that point, when I was in corporate R&D, it was a media flow. There were reasonably sized teams, 20, 50, maybe up to 100, the line management aspects. And so you kind of knew everybody by person. But as you kind of grow into these massive organizations, it's still the same principles. You've got your circle around you. You really, it's really understanding. I think the one thing that I took from being through Qualcomm is I really wasn't afraid of talking to anybody. I talked with technicians. When I was doing trials, I was in the factory making sure that the factory was meeting their schedules and talking to the planners and talking to the line people and, hey, what are the problems? How can I help you? To talking to Paul Jacobs was working on the vocoder. I'd go and, hey, what is a vocoder? What is a vocoder? And talk to him for a few hours and just figure out what's going on. I didn't even know who he was. Right. And, being able to be in that environment where it is open like that and coming from academia and, you don't have those boundaries and hierarchies that are there. So I think one thing is understanding your team and being able to talk to people and listen. And listening is so important and, being sincere. So if they, when you're listening to what they have to say and actively listening and, kind of giving them help when they need help. I think that's one piece. It's like managing down and up and kind of being there for your team. But I think it's also networking around. What is the environment your team's in? Being able to kind of work with the people around you to make sure that the environment your team's working in is meshing with other teams, that you understand what these other teams need for your team or what they need to give to yours, how you work within the organization and what the organization's trying to do. And, that big picture is really important for leads, and it's at every level. It doesn't have to be the whole organization that but, your customers and your vendors, you need to understand that pipeline. And that helps with trying to motivate your team to do what they need to do. And everybody really wants to do a good job. You just have to find those common goals that people can kind of rally behind and, make sure that you're honest and, you try to be sincere. So those are kind of like the principles.
Well, can you think of one of the biggest challenges that you faced as a leader that might at the time have seemed like an intractable challenge, insurmountable, and how you overcame it? I'm sure you faced a lot of them because you had a long career, but, just thinking about, again, teams that are full of motivated, intelligent people from around the world. You had a lot of engineers from India, from China, is there a challenge that stands out for you in your mind, and how did you work through that as a leader?
Well, there's a few key big challenges. I think one of the challenges was I was working in media flow and where we were doing these trials and kind of, probably had like 3 or 4 deployments, and we were doing a big deployment with USA. And I went in and talked to my boss and gave an update of how we were planning and all this stuff. And he's like, Jon, you're doing these 5 things. I want you to think about 20. You're going to take over the world. I want this to be huge. How can you do that? You need to expand your mind. And my head I could feel the top of my head like pop. And it was like, oh my God, that's crazy. But, it took a little time, but it wasn't impossible to think that. It's not like we ever did that much. But it was just like an aha moment. It's just, you get kind of contained within what you know and how things are working. And at every once, you got to be challenged to kind of like expand it out to something bigger. And your mind just gets comfortable in this space. And if you just let it go out, it's just awareness. And it takes a little while, and it kind of hurts at first, but it's not too bad. So same thing with leading like a big team. It's like, okay, there's 300 people, but you have lieutenants, you have captains, you have directors and senior directors, and you work within that circle. You kind of like instill your principles and why those are good. And, and you try to make sure you have reviews and that things are going through. You really have to have people that you trust. People that you respect in those positions. So I would have weekly meetings in India with the lead there, and we just really hit it off. I had a bi-weekly meeting in Germany, and you just ask questions about what's really happening. And these people also had that full centered, they would tell me what was going on, and they knew how to tell me what was important. And we would share priorities and what was happening here, and that would help them understand. And so you just have to trust and delegate to the point, but also verify and make sure that they're doing the right thing and that you're there to help them and you're able to protect them, in terms of, when they get in trouble. So when they trust that you've got their back, and you have to have that rapport. And if you've got like somebody who's got their own agenda, you really need to find people around that you can confirm and verify. It's like, okay, well, let's work on that and be sincere with that person and kind of pull them into the fold, but, be able to have some checks and balances. So I don't know, I'm kind of rambling.
No, I think that's some of the pieces that I pulled out of there are certainly the balance between delegation, or the tension really between delegation, full blind trust, and trust but verify.
Yeah.
And really depends on the setting and who you're working with. And I think that's something I wrestle with in my leadership too, is there are times when we know, or we think we know, we could be wrong, as leaders, that we could do it better. Right? There's a task and you're like, I could just jump in and do that.
Yeah.
But then the other person doesn't have an opportunity to grow. And they also don't have an opportunity to demonstrate that they may be better at the job than we are.
And it takes time away from you.
That's right. And then you're down a rabbit hole that you didn't even want to get near.
Yeah.
And I think that's, how did you, I mean, now you're in a very peaceful, retired state, but for decades, how did you manage your time? And how did you balance work and home and family?
I do want to say, kind of going back,
the
other big challenge was doing layoffs.
Oh, I didn't want to just throw that out there about laying people off, because I remember many nights we'd meet up for a drink and you look like you'd just been dragged through the car wash.
Those are tough. Those are, that's where you're really trying to be objective for the company. And, the company's got to make money, and there's budgets to be made. And when you make layoffs, it's a matter of, sometimes it's a matter of how many people, and a lot of times how much salary they have. And there's a lot of hard trade-offs and kind of pulling back in the human aspect. And I've had to lay off some very close, wonderful people, and those are super painful. Luckily
for financial reasons.
And, maybe some of the decisions weren't quite, could I take them back? Maybe. But in general, I think they've worked out, and, I've been able to kind of work through and help, see these people have successful careers after Qualcomm or after the job layoff. So those are painful, and there always are. I don't think anyone can say that those are easy to do.
Right. I think someone who says that's easy is either not telling the truth or they need some extended therapy. So speaking of therapy and self-care and balance and time management, all that, how did you do that? I remember I always used to say, John, you're not going to make it to 60. I'm glad to see. I don't want to out you on your age, but I think you made it there. And you're looking good and you're moving forward. Because I knew the hours that you worked, and I knew the pressure that you were under, and I knew the global aspect of your job, where when you were asleep, someone else was waking up on the other side of the world, and they may have questions. You wake up and your questions are there waiting for you. How did you do it all?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a frog in a boiling water, kind of aspect where you really just don't know. It's also this kind of how much you can do, and you don't really want to think of what you can't do. You're always thinking what you can. A lot of responsibility. I mean, it was never 3,000 people, but it was more like 1,500, maybe 2,000.
Wow. It's a lot.
It's still a lot.
It's still a mid-sized town in the Midwest.
You feel this responsibility to these people, and there's a little bit of pressure. You want to succeed, and a lot of these things really make a difference. I mean, it's a lot of it's and the email, you just work out ways to filter and keywords that you search through, and you can kind of tell what's important and what isn't. You kind of keep your tabs on, I basically you have good project schedules, you have good, to-dos. Never really was good at setting up to-do actions, but I always kind of drove things through email and scheduling meetings, and had good administrators that would kind of take care of me. And it was, you just kind of, there's a lot of late hours, a lot of, and you can't really work that late unless you kind of like it. Yeah. So in some ways it was stressful, but in other ways it was rewarding. So, and you kind of get caught up, and the one thing at Qualcomm is everybody's kind of doing it.
Right.
So there's this kind of group pressure, if you will, and you don't really think about it. But when your team's working really hard and they're working over the weekends, you're thinking, well, I'm one of my leadership principles is lead by example and make sure. And there's a little bit of catch 22 because you don't want to be working late, because then that pulls your team in. But there's definitely, you never know when you should stop. And so, or how you pull back. And I think with COVID, it really did kind of calm everybody down a little bit at Qualcomm, where, people kind of realize that there's a little bit of a health risk here and mental risk. So things have kind of calmed down a little bit, I think, but there's still this kind of peer pressure that happens. And I don't know, you kind of just get used to it. I almost kind of, now that I am retired, I almost miss it in a way. It's just like, hey, there's not, I don't have this big long list of email to look at. It's not bad. It's definitely a fun challenge to kind of get used to. It's not too bad, but I don't know. It was just kind of being connected and understanding what's going on, and kind of being aware of what the priorities were, and really having a good sense of prioritization. That really, really helped, like what needed to get done, listening to your team. Yeah. And it wasn't any special skills or calendaring or some app that I used. It was just kind of brute force and getting used to it. It's really driven by email a lot, actually. And understanding who people were. We have a Photo PH. It's basically a library of all the employees. And in this library, there's all the email lists that they attend. So you can go and search anybody in the Qualcomm. You can find out who they line report to. But if you go through their email lists, you kind of get a little picture of what they are, or some of their, which teams they're on, what they're working on. I really miss that PH because it really told me a lot. It would help me kind of navigate the whole organization and figure out who to go and who's working on what. And even with people I knew, I could kind of catch up with them just by looking at their profile.
So you also had pretty amazing support at home.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And so that's important, right? Because you know that's being taken care of while you're working late hours.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. That's one of the challenges
and now you're in her hair all the time, so she's
not too bad.
Not too much.
Not too bad. She's busy.
Okay.
She's going through acupuncture school. Niku.
Yeah.
She's an amazing woman. It's amazing when things don't work or you start feeling like, oh, there's tension. That's something you really got to get settled because it's such an anchor to be able to do what I was doing at Qualcomm. I mean, she's the reason I was able to, up until the time I got married and started dating Niku, things were just topsy-turvy and I wasn't really taking care of myself. And it was kind of ragged, but it's amazing having her. And she's just such a supporting health nut, just really all about, and she really takes the family so seriously, and she nurtures the kids and she nurtures me, and it's just, what a wonderful person.
Yeah.
You got to have that.
Yeah,
that
you
does
do.
help.
You definitely lucked out.
It's kind of a secret sauce.
No, you lucked out. So I want to pivot a little bit. We touched on our service on the Waldorf School board as co-chair. I think neither of us was too much into being the chair, and then we talked each other into co-chair.
Yeah, exactly.
But you chose the Waldorf School for all your children for their preschool through eighth grade education.
Yeah,
so
they all went
why Waldorf education?
Well, coming from Madison, Wisconsin, kind of the Berkeley of the Midwest or Berkeley of the Big Ten, I was kind of a left-leaning. I'd always kind of on the side, and being in dance and having this kind of spiritual connection and really, we just lucked into it. I mean, Niku found it. She was looking at Montessori and Waldorf, and she basically kind of did the legwork. And when I found out about it, I'm like, wow, this really makes sense. I didn't really know too much about Steiner and the whole foundation behind it at that point. I don't know that would have scared me away, but I just liked the social aspect that it brought to the children and how it grounded and how they looked at them in a wholesome, full approach to childhood and, immersive, and how they interact with this class and the rhythms that they induce and the well-rounded education of, eurythmy and handwork and orchestra and math and physics science could be a little bit beefier, especially in the grades. But in terms of their creating their own workbooks and the amount of richness and the mythical stories and how they bring that through the curriculum, I really, I've really enjoyed and the community around. I mean, the people that you find within Waldorf and, the relationships I've had with other parents at Waldorf have been very rich, and they've also kind of carried me through this crazy high-tech company world. It's always been kind of a
counterbalance.
I've always had counterbalances when I was out throughout my whole life, and
dance and science lab.
Exactly. And so Waldorf kind of provided that cultural counterbalance to the high-tech world. Yeah. And
it was interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that counterbalance piece, because for someone who's in a high-tech career and I think several of your children are in the math and science orientation in college now, and or headed into college. I know that's been one of the questions I've had about the Waldorf School, even in regards to my own daughter and her journey there. And there were a lot of wonderful things that came out of it, but the math piece was a weakness. So it's interesting to see, even despite that, I think you would put your kids in again if you had it. If you had
I think I would. We did some tutoring, kind of helped them through the math, and they've caught up during. One of them's in math major, the other one's becoming a lawyer. And
oh, okay, that's right.
One's still a junior, but yeah, I think, and high school, junior in high school.
Yeah.
So I think I would definitely put my kids back through Waldorf. I think there's definitely a capacity within Waldorf to teach math. Mm-hmm. I did a high school training and was focused on math and physics. That. Back before I joined QCT, it was like a summer up in Sacramento, and
you had your midlife crisis.
I guess you could call that
midlife career crisis.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was thinking about being a teacher, maybe holding up, and then we bought a house, and that kind of went to the wayside.
The numbers didn't work
That's probably when we met.
Probably right around there, because I thought, who is this dude? Like, what? Qualcomm to what? Okay, well, we'll see.
What is that all about? But it's. I think it definitely has the capacity, and I think I met some really amazing math teachers through that experience, if you will. I think it's just kind of like how the school kind of handles it, and they try. It's just it's definitely tough. But yeah, I think it's something that's easily overlooked.
I'm going to ask the question that my daughter has told me to stop asking, because she's my editor and also unsolicited commentator she gives me feedback in real time almost.
I'm sure she does.
The AI question. Do you think that we're going to get to a point where AI will replace... So let's just say you had 1,500 people on a team in the height of the QTC work. Are we going to get to a point where AI does a lot of that work instead of individual humans?
Well, I think AI can really enhance how we do that work. The way I look at AI is it basically allows us to do innovation, to do more work. So yeah, I think AI might be able to take a lot of the mundane aspects of even doing software development, even doing any kind of, large language model kind of thing, coming up with, doing text, doing translations, there's a lot of aspects that can be enhanced with AI. But I also think it allows us to expand what it is that we can work in and really innovate in terms of areas that we can grow. So I think we're in store for a massive, evolution of what we can do with chips and how systems can come together. I mean, right now there's multiple chips that are getting combined. Now they're stacking chips together. They're really looking at, Murphy's Law is kind of coming to, we're getting close to the edge here. But, now we're doing 3D chips, and there's a lot of other aspects that are going to be enhancing and kind of packing this in pretty soon. Maybe we'll have cubes of chips. It won't be just a single or multiple layers. It'll be stacked on top of each other. So I think the complexity is going to require people to kind of design those. And I think AI will kind of like be our help to help design those. So I think the surface area is going to grow bigger, but yeah, I think in terms of today, I think the jobs that we have, it's definitely going to be going to AI. And I think AI is going to help us do those so that we can do more. I really look at it as an opportunity as opposed to something that's going to be taking jobs away personally.
It's fascinating to see. I think I've been playing around just with ChatGPT version 4 or whatever for the last year or so, and even to see the advances that it's made, and then also the limitations in terms of. I was laughing because the platform that we upload this podcast, we upload it to this platform, and from there it goes to Spotify and Apple and whatever. So it's like a feed.
Yeah.
And we put the show notes in there and everything. And so there's an AI option. You can click AI, and AI will actually enhance the sound quality, but also it writes show notes for you based on the content. So you don't, if you're rushed for time or whatever, I like to write, and I have a couple folks helping me, and we like to just listen to the episode and write it. But I noticed one recently that was up in there, and I thought, there's no way I would say that. It's good, but it just doesn't sound like me and doesn't sound like anyone else on the team. And it was because it was AI. It was just a little bit too
edgy, or
no, it was more a little bit too heavy on the adverbs and adjectives, right? Just like almost like writing ad copy for something like late night TV ads for something like one of those as seen on TV commercials, like the most amazing thing. Just put this belt on. You'll lose 20% of your body fat before you wake up in the morning. Do it right now. And if you order now, you'll get a free carrying case, that kind of thing. And so it was the show notes for that. And I was laughing, but maybe in a year, it might be indistinguishable from our style of writing for our team, right? Maybe it's learned that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting even to think about analyzing big data sets. I've recently been playing around with, taking a spreadsheet, having AI analyze and say, give me top three data patterns that are in this spreadsheet. You know how long that takes me?
Yeah.
A long time. It takes this thing 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think in those areas, of course, we're going to need to go back and verify. And I had a guest on here last calendar year, and I'd gone on in advance, and I said, list the top most cited articles that this guy wrote. He was a college professor. Give me the top 10 most cited articles that he wrote. It gives me top 10. I have them ready, and so before the interview, I'd say, hey, can I ask you, did you write these? And he's like, no, that one sounds like something I wrote, but I never wrote it with this co-author. So it's because it was, in some ways, it was almost creating this thing out of thin air. The format was perfect, right? So it looked really official, but the facts were still squishy.
Yeah.
So I think the thinking person, the critical thinker, is going to wade through this and go, okay, it can be a powerful tool over here, and over here it's just not ready yet. But, we've had it around a long time. If you have a self-driving car or you have Alexa or Siri, you've been using it for years.
AI is amazing. Yeah, it has been for a while.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody who was working in AI back in 95. Yeah. He was a graduate student, and, I'm like, whoa, you were in AI? Yeah, I was back then.
Yeah, now everybody wants to.
No, it's just taking off.
It's taking off everywhere.
It's amazing.
Yeah. How can schools, K-12, prepare students for a career like yours?
Schools in K through 12.
Like in my line of work, how can we at least position students to be able to have the opportunities based on a lot of hard work that you put in and study, but position students so that they could conceivably end up where you are?
I think it's executive management. I think as you get into a company, I was like a system engineer, a test engineer, you could say, but it was somebody that really, it was basically, I think it's the skill set to kind of do what it takes. I don't know how to really define it, but it's being open to, it's more like a skill set of getting things done and having these fundamentals. I mean, you need to have, whether I did electrical engineering or aeronautical engineering, I could have done physics. It probably would have been a little tougher to get this job, but, with Qualcomm, just being, an intelligent person and being able to, having the desire to get things done, that really helps. And then as you get into a business and you want to be a leader, I mean, if you're saying, how do I lead like 1,200, 1,500 people? How do I get into it? Not all companies, it's easy to do that.
And not all of them need that.
And not many need that, right? So I think it's, either being a software developer, computer science, electrical engineering. Once you get into an engineering field, that's really when you get this business training. I mean, and figuring out how to lead. So from K to 12, it's just kind of being good at the fundamentals, kind of being open to what's happening in the world, understanding the systems or how things connect together, and how things operate, getting a little exposure to what, academics. I mean, when I look at my career, it was getting exposure to all these different things, these anchor points where all of a sudden academics, the university opened up. All of a sudden, math, where I had an opportunity to go see a company. And when you see a company, ask questions like, okay, who's in charge? What are the outputs? Who's your customer? How do you get this done? I think those are the kind of questions that demystify these industries, and it just kind of like opens your eyes that there are these positions out there, and there's multiple ways to get there. It's just as you get to a certain point of leadership, you have to have a core skill set that helps you kind of manage these people around you. But that management capability is something that, you can learn it, but there's an empathy component. There's a listening component. There's a awareness of your surroundings and networking, being able to network around. There's, kind of asking questions and not being afraid to, really listen for the answers. There's a lot of aspects to. So K to 12, I say that, I think being in technology, just understanding that there's all these trees that you can kind of follow. You can be high tech. You can be an individual contributor. You can work on patents. You can really, be a real technical contributor. Or you can be like an executive leader and make sure that things get done, that things get commercialized, they go to market. And I tell you, there's a lot of branches in between those two, even, of trying to do something within the high-tech field. Does that make sense?
That's great. Yeah, it does make sense. And it's as much the soft skills as it is the hard skills.
Yeah.
No matter what the industry is, right?
Exactly.
So I have two more questions for you. You've been very generous with your time. What would the 60-year-old you say to your 25-year-old self? Other than, I don't think the dance is going to become a long-term career.
Oh no, I would say enjoy the heck out of that dance. I mean, when I was dancing, that just basically, once I was 25, I was like, my life is so great. Everything can go downhill. It's fine. I've reached my peak. I'll be happy if I get to 40. I don't even want to live past 40.
Right.
Everything is gravy or change. So I would just tell my 25-year-old just not to be so emotional, to try to calm down on women, and try not to feel like, just relax and keep that fire and just try to get things done and help people. That's kind of what I would hope to tell that person. But I don't know if he would listen.
Yeah, no, probably not. That's probably what is it? What is it? Youth is wasted on wisdom is wasted on. I don't know. My mom has some saying about if youth should and old age could or something, but it's a proverbial thing. So, but yeah, the things we wish we knew, and if we'd known them then, we wouldn't have paid attention.
Exactly.
So the last question, before I get to the last question, I want to see if there's anything you'd like to add that's been kicking around in your head before we wrap for today with my last question.
Peppering around a bunch of topics. Yeah.
That's how these go. Yeah, this is a reflection of my brain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
your
linear.
brain or my brain?
Or both of our brains.
Yeah.
There's nothing linear going on here.
Yeah, I don't feel anything I've missed. I'm sure there's a bunch of things I'd like to, say hi to a bunch of friends.
Yeah, there we go. My tens and tens of listeners out there. We have our friends, and some of them, it may actually get to them because we have mutual friends who I think listen to this. So the last question is, you're given the opportunity to design a billboard on the side of the 5 freeway. And remember, people are driving by at 70 miles an hour, and it's just one billboard. It's not pages and pages of text. But what does Jon Detra's billboard say about the message that he wants to get out there to the world? Something about your life, something about your beliefs, something about your work, something about your family, your dreams.
This is one of those things you don't want to think too hard about.
You don't. You just got to. There's two groups of people who do. Some people immediately go, "Oh, it would say this." Some people are like, it would have an image of this, and I'm going, I think you cheated on this. You heard it somewhere.
Yeah.
Other people, it takes them a while, and in both of those,
I could have cheated, and I forgot. Because it's not the first time I've heard the question, but I was going to think about it, and even when I heard it, I thought about it a little bit. And I thought, oh. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the world is just so crazy right now. I mean, if there's anything to try to get people to just work together, I mean, it just seems like something so simple. Everybody, I know there's all these divisions, but at the ground roots, everybody wants to do what's right. And it's just, and I don't know, it's not, I don't want it to look like some religious kind of like church thing, but gosh, that just would be so, just some kind of image to just get along and give each other a chance. And, just, I tell you, that's something I'd like to get out to the world personally, just to, I'm just so tired of all this division and, being a leader and seeing all these different personalities and, being at a company like Qualcomm and getting all these personalities to work and finding those common grounds. It's possible. I mean, there's possible. So many cultures at Qualcomm, and we're able to make it work. I mean, there's so many different right and left rings, and, if you've got these common goals, it's just, and it's not just one side or the other. It's really, so yeah, that would probably be it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jon. I think that's an apropos place to wrap for today. And I really wanted to thank you for coming in and chatting. And now I've covered two of my very dear friends who both were former Qualcomm employees, you and Bo James. Mm-hmm. And so I know we've got a little head-to-head competition going on between the two of you for this podcast. But in all seriousness, it was a pleasure to chat with you and learn some new things about your life that I didn't know. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.